Washington is reducing the number of U.S. diplomats in Iraq. April 6, 2019. Zero comments. The administration of U.S. President Donald Trump is considering reducing its diplomatic mission in Iraq and Afghanistan as part of a broader effort to save the United States from the 18-year-old deadly conflict in Afghanistan. According to U.S. officials, the State Department is preparing to reduce the number of U.S. diplomats deployed in Kabul in 2020 by half. Said 3 U.S. officials familiar with the internal deliberations plans may also be made to reduce the number of diplomats sent to the U.S. Embassy in Iraq. As Washington ends its war readiness in the Middle East and South Asia to prepare for what it calls the era of superpower competition with China and Russia, the deliberations coincide with U.S. peace talks with the Taliban and assessments on how to withdraw U.S. military forces from Afghanistan, whether the mysterious diplomatic outposts are battling U.S. embassies in Kabul and Baghdad in the largest diplomatic missions in the world after U.S. military interventions. Their diplomats represent only part of the embassy staff in Baghdad, which includes officials from other federal agencies, contractors, and security personnel. In February, NPR reported an internal document leaked from the U.S. Embassy in Kabul that described the outpost as too large and urged a thorough review of its size. Although the document did not specify the size of the proposed cuts, the presence of the State Department in Afghanistan is dwarfed by the U.S. military, but the embassy in Kabul, along with the embassy in Baghdad, constitutes a disproportionate proportion of the state budget and its staff compared to embassies in other parts of the world. Some diplomats believe it is time to turn these resources elsewhere. We regularly hear from Africa that we are more than Chinese diplomats working on economic or other issues, said a senior State Department official, who asked not to be identified. We cannot continue to focus all this money in Afghanistan and Iraq. It's a matter of where we can deploy our best limited resources to avoid losing more competitors to the top competitors who are rapidly climbing. We cannot understand. The official said the plans under consideration envisage the abolition of 20 to 30 diplomatic posts this year from Iraq, where the U.S. diplomatic mission includes the embassy in Baghdad and the consulate in Erbil. 2 U.S. officials said up to 30 to 50% of the mission to Iraq could be cut in 2020, and details of plans that had been in operation for months. The embassy in Baghdad has about 16,000 employees, 2,000 of whom are diplomats, according to a New York Times report in February that outlined some plans. U.S. policy reveals plan to reduce presence in Iraq, posted by Walter. Twilight News. 8 minutes ago. The U.S. administration's Donald Trump is considering a possible reduction in the number of U.S. diplomats in Afghanistan and Iraq, according to the magazine Foreign Policy. The newspaper quoted U.S. officials who declined to be named that it is planned to reduce the number of U.S. diplomats in Kabul twice by 2020. In Iraq it is possible, according to the plan has not been approved so far, we'll lose between 20 and 30 U.S. diplomat seats there this year, and between 30 and 50% of the staff of U.S. diplomatic missions in Baghdad and Erbil, Kurdistan region, next year. The plan is in line with Washington's intention to reduce its military presence in the Middle East and South Asia in preparation for the so-called grand competition with China and Russia. We always get information from Africa that the number of Chinese diplomats who are there solving economic and other issues exceeds the number of American diplomats by between 4 and 5 times, a Foreign Office spokesman was quoted as saying. We cannot continue to focus all this money in Afghanistan and Iraq. Since 2001, the United States and its NATO allies have conducted a military operation in Afghanistan against the Taliban and other armed groups. This is the longest process in the history of the U.S. Armed Forces. In 2018, the Trump administration introduced a new strategy for its work in South Asia, which required the active participation of Asian countries in the settlement of the conflict in Afghanistan. In addition, Washington is considering the possibility of withdrawing its forces from Afghanistan or seriously reducing its military presence there if there are guarantees that terrorist organizations such as Daesh and Al-Qaeda will not carry out its work in the territory of Afghanistan.